Good afternoon, and thanks for joining. We have an exciting topic today. We want to speak about the importance of digital transformation with you and discuss proven adoption strategies when it comes to technology and technology adoption, of course, in the field of property management. And I'm not alone here today. I'm pleased to have two experts from the world of property management here with me today. On the one hand, we have Brendan Ackerman. Brendan is the general manager at Varsity Communities. Hi, Brendan. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Thanks, Danny. As Danny said, I am the general manager for Varsity Communities for one of our locations here in Oshawa. Varsity Communities prides ourselves off of legendary student rentals. So that's our main book of business is to connect students with some really great places to live. We have locations all throughout Ontario and hoping to have many more in the future.
Fantastic. Great to have you here today. Really looking forward to hearing your perspective and strategies, your experiences. And we have Manuel Mitzi. Manuel is the director of property management at North 44 Properties. Hi, Manuel.
Hello, Danny. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate so much to be here. So yeah, I work with North 44 Properties. We look after affordable urban lifestyle. So in your affordable living here in Toronto, we also have units in Thunder Bay, Sault Ste. Marie, London, as well as in Charlotte, North Carolina. So we get to work in a lot of fun places providing homes for people.
Perfect. Great to have you here today. And we also have myself. My name is Danny Abulela. I'm the head of account management and customer success at Rentmoola and our new brand LetUs. And if anybody has any questions, please feel free to ask them directly into the chat and we will be happy to answer them. Yeah, the main topic will be the importance of digital transformation and proven adoption strategies, and that in the field of property management with real-world examples from Varsity, from North 44, and from LetUs. Let's go a little bit more in depth. Let's show you the agenda. So basically, what are the digital trends in the rental industry? That's something we want to have a look at today. And how do these best practices out of the industry actually look like? How can one, as property manager, adopt technologies that create an increase in efficiency while also improving the tenant experience and maybe there with the tenant relationship at the same time? And last but not least, let's also have a look into the future together, and we want to share some perspectives, our expectations when it comes to a near and a midterm future, and that under the topic umbrella of digitalization, property management, and technology adoption. So basically, it's some kind of a current overview about the industry from that perspective. We want to further analyze if there are also, maybe if there is a potential disconnect. Are there friction points between property managers and tenants? And I think there's one topic that is unavoidable at the very moment, that is the impact of COVID-19, in this case, the economic impact of COVID-19. And yes, I think we're looking forward to discussing that with you today. Okay, let's start with a strong statement here. And although obvious, I still think it's worth mentioning. So technology has the opportunity to enhance every part of the journey for landlords, tenants, property managers, and other stakeholders in this environment, in this ecosystem. And it can further improve these fields. It can create and enhance transparency, and it can help us make better informed decisions. I think today, during our think tank, we want to discuss on this why is that the case, but also on the how. So how can a property manager actually benefit from technology? And then in this content, we will share best practices from the industry as well. Okay, technology as a way to improve efficiency and tenant experience. What these stats that we brought you today are telling us in one sentence is that there's a certain severeness of the impact on a profitability side on property managers that were affected by COVID-19. So in other words, we see that 76% of property managers were reporting less rent payments at the very end, which is a tremendous impact. So they were receiving less payments during the period of COVID-19. And at the same time, and this is the better news, we see that this was only the minority of property managers that were affected. So in other words, one could say that 60% of property managers say that they were not directly affected by COVID-19. This goes along with another finding of this survey, where 46% of property managers were stating that technology and therewith adopting new technologies is a main priority in their daily business and a core topic of what they are doing at the very moment. So what does that tell us? Digitalization has been happening in property management long before COVID hit. This is a finding that we also made as a company. And while property management was an industry that was not yet accelerated as other industries when it comes to digitalization, digitalization was already there. However, COVID was somewhat acting as a catalyst and was further accelerating technology adoption and the need for adapted technologies in the field of property management. Again, and then one can see, and maybe this is where this message closes, it paid out for companies. It paid out for companies that were already ahead in terms of implementing technologies, ahead of other property management companies. And this may then also explain why only 40% of property management companies say that they were impacted by COVID-19. This data that we see in the industry, these stats from property managers about how actually COVID has or has not impacted profitability after all, it shows very well that the impacts were pretty severe. So people, in other words, are really having a hard time affording the typical housing spending. So therewith, this problem, although not everybody is affected, is bigger than one sees on the surface. Because at the same time, these figures stress that 76% of affected tenants had less rent payments at the very end, which shows that there were people struggling in making these payments. I think that North 44 in this case is a great example how negative impacts, as the one described, there were unavoidable ones, but also some that were actually avoidable with the help of technology. And we will definitely have a look today about how North 44 did that and how they were able to mitigate risk by adapting technology. Okay, today we brought some key areas of transformation, as we called it. We identified three. First one, artificial intelligence and automation to increase efficiency. And this is a question about how to improve processes and how to identify and create efficiencies. And the second one, and I find this one also very interesting because in my personal interactions with property managers, I was hearing about that very, very often, frequently, the challenge of balancing community and technology and the entire topic of tenant interaction, tenant engagement, tenant communication with technical tools. And last but not least, making data-driven decisions with the help of new empowerment of technology. Because we also see that there's a certain explosion of different kind of technologies at the moment in our industry. It starts with virtual showings and maybe it ends with payments, communication, managing lease processes. So it's sometimes very difficult to prioritize. So that's why we drilled it down to these three key topics that shall help to focus on the right topics here. And there's one dimension that we are not taking entirely into consideration here. And that's a question about what the tenant actually wants. So what technologies do quality tenants desire? And therewith, when focusing on these three, plus adding that dimension, one can basically improve operations at the one hand and tenant satisfaction at the other, which should always be somewhat correlated. Let's have a look at that today. I was already mentioning the tenants and the upcoming questions. So what technologies do quality renters want at the very end? And here we identified four. And in other words, we discovered that tenants are placing more importance on these than on other topics, and other topics in which one may invest as well. And again, the idea is to focus on topics that are the most relevant among a variety of technologies available. And these four key fields were a necessity for paying rent online. 65% of tenants, and that's that, were mentioning that this is of major importance for them. And still, 58% of tenants in the study that we are looking at were mentioning that tenant communication, and especially communicating via text message and email with property management mainly, is a super important topic for tenants, for these tenants. And as good as half of the tenants were still seeing a very importance in the role of, or in the feasibility of accessing a residential portal, on a technological way. Basically, in other words, having access to a residential portal. 45% of tenants in that study were mentioning that filling maintenance requests online is a important and very critical feature that they are interested in. Okay, the best practices in adopting technology. It's really interesting to see what wider trends in industry are, what tenants actually want, and to hear about the property manager perspective. What we want to do now is to open up the floor to the experts in the field with Manuel and Brendan, so that they can also share their best practices and insights in terms of running adoption strategies. So what has been effective, what hasn't been effective, what has changed, also in regards to the recent events, what are the best practices overall? Maybe we can directly start with one topic that is pretty big, although often not directly discussed, and it has been impacted by digitalization as well, and by COVID, so I think that's a good one. Let's speak about staff. So Manuel, in terms of managing staff under the topic of digitalization, how is North 44 doing that, and what are some interesting strategies?
It's funny you asked that, Danny, because I think that was the biggest. You would think it was about the tenants to begin with, but before you think about the tenants, you actually have to think about, yourselves, right? And how you're going to be able to manage it. And at the beginning, it was, you're given a couple of days and it's all of a sudden everyone needs to go home. We all need to be able to manage this. And some things which couldn't be done at home. I mean, you're talking about checks that have to be posted and brought to the bank. You're having to look at and mitigate the loss of time and loss of people. And I had to, for instance, myself, I mean, I wouldn't normally even go to the bank, but I was having to take that chance away from all of the stuff in the entire company. And, I guess as upper management, you have to take that responsibility on yourself. So I would take that just so I didn't have to have the staff doing some of those things, right? Especially at the beginning, we didn't know a lot about COVID, right? We were so scared about even leaving our homes. So here I'm having to, I was putting myself on the line by assisting in any department that needed it, to get it done. I found that a lot of our ability to work from home was pretty easy once you forwarded a phone line. It was just the phone line that was kind of the issue, because you're used to being in a group answering phones. So that probably was the biggest issue at the beginning, figuring out how to manage phone lines coming through to one person, and then them kind of sending it out in a group, if that makes sense. And managing from home, I manage already a lot of out of the city myself, but even I wasn't used to managing staff in my own office, not being beside them, right? Not being in the next office, being able to get up and walk to them. So really having to rely upon, doing FaceTime calls and making sure that we didn't lose the person-to-person communication that we would normally have. I think that was extremely, extremely important.
Awesome, yeah, exciting.
So for me, I totally agree with everything that Manuel was saying. For my team specifically, and sort of what I've seen in our industry, we mainly have student rentals. So managing a community that really focuses on the student community or the student vibes, not being able to plan those events, to have the staff in on site to communicate with one-on-one with those tenants as well, and primarily those students was challenging. But more specifically is with the fact that we offer maintenance services or we offer housekeeping services, we don't know where we sort of fall in those regulations that are set out by the government. So if we're in, let's say, a lockdown period, what really is actually considered an essential service in that regard, right? What is considered safe for us to actually go in on site and provide these services that we've sold as an opportunity to live in our community. So those are all important things to note, and that was really a big challenge, aside from the communication on a one-to-one basis with your staff, but more so on the what does it mean, what does lockdown mean, specifically in terms of COVID. And thinking of those safety measures now that we have to put in place that most organizations, specifically, may not have had a written policy about, may not have had something in terms of what to follow or some sort of guidelines. So I think that was very challenging to adapt with, because there's not a one-stop shop. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach. Every business is very unique, and every community is very unique with regards to the products or services that you provide.
Okay, yeah. What would you think were the main challenges, and is there one situation or one way that you remember how you could overcome them in regards to market and managing stuff?
Yeah, so I mean, for me and my team is one of the ways that we overcame it was just to make sure that we had. I'm a big component, so I'm going to backtrack a little bit. I'm a big component of ensuring that my team is feeling 100% supported and feeling 100% comfortable in their new work environment, in their new shoes. So a lot of times I would say to my team, make sure you take a break, go out and go for a walk, take some time to just be you, because it's very easy for us when you're working from home. We don't have a commute anymore. We don't have to leave the office to go and take lunch. Everything is within the comfort of home, which has its benefits, but it also has its cons. Is it really good for us to sit in an office environment at home between 9 to 5 without being able to sort of distance ourselves from that? So that's something that I had to overcome with my team, with regards to making sure that they understood how to take that time that they needed to take to step back.
I agree. Very similar type things here. I think that, our job as a manager is the same way I feel about my children at home, right? We were all going through something, and we really had to make sure that those daily check-ins were there to are we okay getting through this? You know, especially when we had to implement so many things that weren't the case before. You know, here we were now having to, you know, analyze work orders, analyze certain things that we would never have had to analyze before. We would have just gone and done them, you know? So really having to figure out, like you said, what is essential, what makes sense today, what can be done today, or what can wait a little bit. You know, maybe wait a month or two if it's not going to be dire, you know, which was really, really hard, I know, on the staff to have to make those decisions. So just being there and being supportive for them was the best thing.
Okay, yeah, I can imagine it's a tough one, especially with properties at different locations, right? And that under the COVID situation. So what digital solution did you adopt at that time to help?
I don't know, for
I
us.
can speak to.
Go ahead, Brent.
Sorry, I guess you know, we're adapting to this too.
Exactly.
Indeed. Indeed.
For my team specifically, one way that we adapted to try and help support our workload or that transition or that change of workload was just to embrace technology. So to put in the hands of, let's say, our maintenance technicians, having them the ability to have an iPad so that they can actually perform their work without having to leave and go somewhere else, or to be able to source things all in the same spot, or get those notifications directly to their phones, whether it be a work order or whether it be an emergency situation, but having everything that they possibly need at their fingertips when they need it, as opposed to limiting their abilities to go from one place to the next and take some time with regards to that.
And I think that, you know, in addition to that, it helped then that the tenants had, you know, our online platforms, you know, like you talked about, Danny, before. They had the ability to go and put a work order online or pay a rent or whatever it was, so that they didn't have to necessarily interact with the staff up close and personal. You know, although at the same time still trying to figure out a way for the tenants to be able to interact with them, because that's a lot for tenants. I think we don't understand how much the tenants rely upon seeing someone in the buildings that they live, knowing that those people take care of their needs, you know, even if it's a small need, you know, even if it's something small, it's that person. So fine, we weren't taking them out of the space, so at least they could see them and wave at them, and, you know, maybe, you know, knock elbows if we could. But you know, it was just a balance between giving them that ability online and then having the ability to still have some personal.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. Please go ahead, Brendan.
Sorry, Danny. I was just going to say to Manuel's point. It's true. Like that balance between ensuring that your residents feel comfortable that they can still communicate with you without having to pick up the phone and having that distance has proved to be very challenging in our industry for sure.
Yes.
And we have to adapt to providing those, you know, whether it's a FaceTime call or a Zoom meeting or some sort of Skype call with a tenant or with parents of a tenant, to communicate and show that empathy and show that support that you're there, you really do care, I think is something that we had to do to adapt.
Absolutely. I mean, I can imagine that on the one hand, to ensure also all that this knowledge is at hand at the staff, right, was pretty difficult at the beginning of that time. And I can imagine that anxieties also played a role, right, at the beginning of COVID, both staff and tenants, both the staff and the tenant side. Yeah. Okay. Speaking of collecting payments, was there so how has it? Let's ask a question a bit more openly. Has digitalization and the current events somewhat affected how you collect payments? Maybe starting with Manuel, from your property management perspective.
You know, I think it's helped, Danny. I really do. I think that it's given the ability to the tenant to, I mean, listen, at the end of the day, we want the tenant the best experience, right? That's all we do, is try to make them have a comfortable home and whatever the case may be, right? So giving them the ability to pay online and the swiftness of it, I think is really nice for them, not having to go to the bank and not having to write checks, and the reconciliation for them. It made it so much simpler. And I was happy for that, and for us, and we had started the process of digitalizing payments maybe about a year and a half, 2 years ago, and there was a lot of pushback. I'm not going to lie, it was very hard. You're talking to people, in some cases, who have rented for 30, 40, 50, 60 years, right? The only way they know is to write a physical check and to go and personally hand deliver it to a manager, building manager, right? So it was a lot of training on their behalf to get them to trust that this was an easier way for them. Yes, okay, it's easier and it's simpler for the property manager. I mean, we know that, right? It's an easier thing for us to do. I don't have to have staff in place to go to banks and to enter checks and whatever the case may be, right? So it took a lot of it took a lot of communication and a lot of training on behalf of the tenants to get to understand how much easier and simpler it would be for them to pay online.
Understand. I think, Brandon, in your situation, I mean, you have a comparatively younger demographic, right? But also challenges coming along with that, I can imagine.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, given we have a very different demographic than Manuel's communities, being in the student community, in the student market, almost 100% of our tenants pay via pre-authorized debit. So we never really had a challenge with regards to collecting the payment. I think the biggest challenge that we had in terms of adapting different forms of technology or different situations with COVID, specifically, is communicating with tenants to tell them, like, I understand, you're in a situation, or you may not have a job right now, you may not be able to pay your rent. Just having that communication piece of saying, how do you want to pay? Do you have a plan in place? What do you need from us to make sure that we can be here to support you? I think was it's different. Never, I think, in the history of any of our lives managing properties, have you ever had that communication with the tenant? How can we help you make your rent payments? So I think
absolutely.
It's definitely something that we've seen change. But more importantly, it's just that communication piece, is because a lot of tenants have said or have not said to us that anything with regards to their rent being past due. And then that leads over to the eviction process, and having the government having halted stipulations on how you can actually evict somebody. Have you come to the conclusion with regards to a payment plan? Have you been able to arrange some sort of funds to be transferred? So these are all things that we've had to take a look at in our own communication practices with our tenant.
Yeah, interesting. Thanks for sharing. I mean, it's the inconvenient topic of evictions, right? That you just brought up. Manuel, how's your perspective on that and the influence on technology of it?
I have to say that, like Brandon was saying, when we were communicating with tenants, the appreciation level, especially, I mean, we all know we're going through this, right? There's not one person on earth that doesn't have some connection to this, right? So I think that right there has helped, and the tenants appreciated there being a person to speak to about their situation. Yes, in some cases, of course, I mean, you have to be hard-nosed against it because we have to pay our bills, and of course, everybody wants to pay their bills in some way, shape, or form. So, it has, I can't say it's been easy on our side, of course, not having an eviction process as readily available hasn't been easy, but I do know having time to speak with the tenants about their situations and giving them the ability to work through their issues with you was really, I found very, very human. You know, I personally, when I was at the beginning of the pandemic, when I was at home, I mean, my children would be in the room and they would hear them, so it gave us, it broke the ice really well to have those moments where they could hear my kids in the back, I could hear their kids, I could hear wherever they were, and we could say, okay, look, like, we're in the same shoes, let's find a solution together, to make it work for us.
Absolutely. I mean, we're all in this together at the very end, right? And one knows the reason. Yeah, it's a very new situation. Absolutely. Okay, and Brandon, how did you adapt when you had renters who were only able to make in-person payments? For example, if they didn't have access to online services, I think that I can imagine that was some kind of a challenge. So how are you able to adapt in that field?
Yeah, so I mean, that's a great question. And most of our tenants do pay via electronic means. So whether it's pre-authorized debit or e-transfers is one thing that we allowed throughout the sort of COVID situation. But there were still those tenants who paid by check. So although one situation where we actually, I mean, not really technical, but definitely still something that our team did in the situation faced with COVID was putting in a mailbox. We never had a mailbox before, as easy as that was. Having that as a part of our ways to pay your rent. But again, most of our tenants embrace technology. I mean, they are all students. They have apps on their phones. They being able to have, I know it's been brought up before, having a resident portal that you log into to pay your rent directly from your phone. All of those options are definitely things that we've implemented because of the impact that COVID's had on technology.
Awesome. And Manuel, in your scenario?
The ones who who just would write checks, some of those people we were even able to persuade them to, some of them are old, right? So you're talking about the older, senior tenants.
Indeed, yeah.
They do have caregivers, so we would work it out with the caregiver. I know, I said to one particular tenant, I said, listen, I said, I know your son's coming to take care of you. I said, why don't we work it out that he's there and he's going to set it all up and he'll do it for you. And I said, I'll make sure that on our end it's accepted and it's put into the correct place, and we can confirm with him and I can send an email. You know what I mean? You just have to take the time. There's a lot of time taking. And in cases where you didn't have it, people had to hand in checks. Like I said, I had to get myself in the car and I had to go around and I had to do what I had to do, right? At the end of the day, business still had to go on, right? COVID didn't stop that, right? So we still had to, for those few that weren't able to, for whatever reason.
Okay. Awesome. Okay, let's speak about a topic that was already quite digital to a certain degree. However, I would be super interested in learning how you are dealing with marketing from a digitalization standpoint. What channels you are marketing with, and how it has, or how you have evolved in this regard in in the recent history. And yeah, let's speak a little bit about marketing adoption strategies from a technology standpoint. Manuel, what does come to your mind when thinking of marketing?
It's funny you say that, Danny, because although most of our marketing is online, yes, most of it's digital, it's that little portion that we had before of, signs in places where you started seeing those things weren't working because no one was going anywhere, right?
Yeah.
You realize that no one's driving down this road anymore. No one's seeing this big sign, or no one's passing by and picking up flyers because people didn't want to touch anything even, right? So those things, I realized that we had to rethink, the other 25% that we would have, and push to put that online as well, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Interesting. How did you do that?
Listen, you have to sit and you have to go through every bit of marketing that you do, and you have to, you know, unfortunately contracts are, weren't all ending in the middle of COVID, right? You have to actually sit down and physically think, okay, we're going to have to spend a little bit more money here, and we're going to have to push it in the direction, look at 90 to 100% being online, and then slowly phase out some of that stuff for the time being, because, we are back in a place where people are going to work and whatnot, right? So
Yeah, absolutely.
allowed to have, it is best to have some, physical signage as well out there. But it definitely took some time to switch even that stuff over.
Yeah, I can imagine. And was also maybe Brandon, in your example.
Sure, yeah, for sure. I mean, I definitely agree with Manuel on a lot of things there that he had touched point on. Specifically, to his point about that having to, there's a very small niche group where we've had that sort of word of mouth marketing or that physical presence marketing. So not being able to provide or hand out freebies on the street to try and get people's attention of what we offer. That was an adoption for our team. During COVID, actually, our team managed to find a new channel to market on in terms of electronic means through Spotify. And it's actually brought in a significant amount of impressions and converted to numerous deals for us just by being able to go outside of our comfort zone and find different areas of marketing or different opportunities and avenues to do that. So that's definitely something, because of COVID, we were able to find something that is equal to, if not better than, Google marketing, which we would have never have found.
Okay, so I think I understand that in-person promotion has become more difficult. I mean, it's only logical, right? And so you made use of totally new channels, for example, Spotify is a cool example. Did you see an increase in usage then after that? So did it work out? Were the people open to that?
Yeah, specifically through Spotify, I would say, 100%. I think people, we targeted a platform that a lot of our clients or our residents will use. So the people who we are trying to market to are that younger generation who utilizes Spotify. So I think we found a really good opportunity to grasp and to earn more business through something that's direct in their hands.
Awesome. Just thinking about, I mean, when thinking about this entire process, theoretically, it would be feasible to have it entirely digital, right? Starting with the viewing and all the way to the move in. I mean, how has that happened in your case? So let's speak about virtual tours, for example. Have you worked with such? So basically to display a property entirely virtually? Was that a topic? Maybe Manuel, in your example? I mean, in your case?
Yeah, so, we had started to work on virtual tours, a while back, because we saw that there was a need. There are a lot of people moving into the cities that we have units. So there was always a need for it just for that purpose, right? But what I thought was going to happen is I thought we were going to go right from in-person showings all the way to virtual with no stop. But that's not actually what happened. And so what happened is we had a lot of tenants saying to us, well, I don't want the virtual tour, but I don't want to come to the tour, but I want someone to walk me through it as though I was there. So very odd. I didn't even think about this, to tell you the truth. Years in experience, and you don't even think of these small things. So what I instructed our leasing consultants to do was to book these appointments as though they were coming there, in their time slots, phone the person, do a FaceTime call or whatever type, video call your phone adheres to, and then walk them through the space and do your selling like you're with them. So you
Got
don't
it.
lose.
Yeah.
I think what the issue was is people didn't want to lose out on that personal chat about the community and about the space and about the building and about the unit itself. So I found that actually was a way that we ran a lot more than I thought we would. I think the virtual tours are there and people are using them, but they're not using them, 100% of the time.
I think that's super interesting, I must say, because right at the very end, you can digitalize these processes, but what you cannot digitalize is the human interaction, right? And the behavioral aspect. So people still desire that and need that. And you can, it's interesting. You can just
No, they're just stuck
support
at
that with
home.
technology. Yeah.
They needed to see somebody. And a virtual
Yeah,
tour was
absolutely.
a way of sitting on your TV watching a television show. You know what I mean? It wasn't there was no personal at all. And so at least getting the chance to, and I'm talking about sometimes a leasing consultant making the same appointment over various places with the same person. That people just want people, right? They want the person, right? And we couldn't take that away from them fully.
And I think that's very interesting because at least me personally, I was not aware of that beforehand, right? It could have been the other way around as well, that people simply benefit from the fact that everything is entirely virtual and digital now. But no, still there is the combination, right? Technology plus human interaction to a certain degree.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I totally agree and see Manuel's point too. Just on our note, we were sort of the opposite, whereas our team, our organization prided ourselves off of providing those in-person tours to the point where we didn't have the resources to have digital tours. So, we may have had a video tour, but then it's, what are the measurements? What are the dimensions? There's no floor plans, these types of things. So having to adapt in that regard and really put the power behind providing multiple forms of digital tours, whether it be through Matterports or through a virtual tour or doll houses, these types of things, having to put some money behind getting those out there, I think has been a big component of our transition through this time to more digital. But more importantly too is the majority of the communities that I house are in condominiums, and obviously that condominium has control over the common elements, which are all the common spaces. So your meeting rooms, your rooftop terrace, your barbecue spaces. So we couldn't tour those spaces because they were closed. So how can we effectively market to these opportunities or these areas as a benefit to living in our community? We had to figure out how to manage a way to provide those in a different aspect, and that was through digital tours, but in a sense our whole tour in a video form.
Okay, I think it's a big part of that topic is communication, right? Communication with renters and how to do that, supported by the technology. Am I on the right track, or what do you think?
Oh, I think you're right. I really do think you're right. We all had to adapt and make the communication work, right, through all of these means.
Definitely agree. Yeah.
Was that one of the harder ones, would you say, to adopt communication in that time, or to increase, or to keep the communication vivid with the help of technical solutions?
Yes, it is harder. You have, first of all, you had to, rely upon people going out and putting themselves at risk. Right there is the first thing, right? So that itself made it harder, and then adapting to what the needs of the prospective renter is, right? That itself is another altogether.
Got it.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's it's extremely challenging because it's change. A lot of people don't like change. We can embrace change. We can hire people who live off of change. We can bring people who want to change. But at the end of the day, when you're faced with a pandemic, it sort of shifts your focus, and it shifts your focus overnight. So it was definitely challenging, but at the same time, I think there were a lot of things that came out of this, specifically for our organization, that allowed us to be better, to provide alternative solutions and solutions that will probably continue to be there in the future.
Great. I have one little question left, and it is somewhat correlated to communication. And I hear that personally very, very often. A topic that seems minor but appears to be very difficult to handle in these times, and it's a topic of maintenance requests. So apparently, the current environment often leads to backlogs and is making it difficult to handle maintenance requests. What experiences have you made in this regards most recently? Was it a topic for you too?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, for sure. I think for my business specifically, actually, I'm still going through this now I look at, of course, there are certain maintenance requests that are emergencies, whether, there's a leak of some sort or these types of things, which is an essential service or something that's essential. But how do you define essential? What is essential? The government hasn't defined what essential is in terms of those types of things. So, it leaves us as an organization or a community to determine what is essential. I'm looking at it now with, we've got furnace filters that need to be replaced. Fire alarms should be tested. Is that considered essential? We're now moving into another lockdown.
Absolutely.
Should that be essential? So it's these types of these questions that we ask ourselves. How do we determine what is essential and what's not, specifically in the maintenance realm? Of course, there's certain areas that can be, or certain things that can be postponed, such as painting a wall. That's not essential, but it's to the point where it's those small things that aren't necessarily essential to do right this minute, but can very well be essential after 6 months to a year of going through this.
Okay, yeah, preventative maintenance, right? So how about preventative maintenance? I mean, you mentioned it, there are some work orders that are essential at least once a year, and now we are already in the second year. So how has this been adjusting the schedules here and your scheduling?
Yeah, I mean, I think, for our team, I was talking about this with our maintenance team earlier this week and last week. It comes back to what's essential. So we have to now redefine our annual or our quarterly inspections and plan to get into units to do, furnace filter changes, check the batteries for the smoke detectors. So, is it going to change our preventative maintenance schedule? Yes. Are we going to be doing just those things that we are considering now, a safety concern for our residents? Yes. I think more importantly, though, it's that communication piece. We have to communicate well in advance to our tenants to make sure that they have all the information that they need to understand sort of what is going on and how we're planning to sort of do these things now for the future.
And Brandon, I agree with you. I think that, with something, I think you mentioned before, a furnace filter, right? So in some cases, we've said to the tenants, okay, listen, we don't want to have to enter your unit 15 different times as we would normally, in and around time, beginning and ends of seasons and for quarterly and, so on inspections. We said, okay, well, we're going to leave that at the door for you. And the expectation is, here's the instructions of what to do with it. And here's what you do with the other one, put it back out the door, we'll come and we'll collect it. So it's little things like that you've had to rely upon the tenants a lot more to assist. And when it comes to, because we weren't able to do, full inspections over the last year, really relying upon them to say, okay, listen, this is what we normally look for. If you see any of these things, bring it to our attention because those are essential and we do need to do them, not just for your safety and not just for your comfort, but for the building's longevity, right? Which we have to look at as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. And one thing to add too, one thing that we're doing in our communities now is looking for ways to make our inspections digital, or to allow the tenants to be able to do those inspections themselves.
Yeah.
So whether that's a Zoom call with one of our maintenance technicians for certain items, of course, there are things that we need to be present for. But then there's also things, for people or prospects who are moving in, tenants who are moving into their units, having a digital inspection for that as opposed to an in-person inspection. So we're still covering our bases, they're still covering their bases, but having something tangible at the end of the day to back everyone up.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's exactly what we would do.
Fantastic. Yeah. Very well. I think we're already, the time's flying, coming to the end of our discussion. We were covering a couple of super interesting topics, and I think when wrapping up, basically a finding for today could be that stakeholders have changed to a certain degree, right? I mean, with what is essential or not, these questions, the government has taken in a new role and needs to be taken into consideration. And then we have a lot of supporting technologies, and you have underlined on how you are making sure that these technologies are both adopted by property managers and the tenants alike, and how they impact both your staff and the tenants and their relationship. And one finding that I personally find super interesting, that both of you stressed, is that technology can be the key is absolutely essential at the very moment. Has been in place before COVID, but is essential right now. However, the human component is at least of equal importance, and the one does not work without the other. Do you agree, or is there something you'd like to add?
Oh, I think I totally agree with you, Danny. The world has gone and changed so much over the last year. But one thing has held true. Yes, we need the digital to be able to keep the communication open. Of course, it's the simplest way in most cases. But what has to ride along with it is that we're all in this together. We're all humans. We all need the interaction, and sometimes the digital doesn't take the place of that; it assists that.
Perfect. Yeah.
I totally agree with what Manuel said there. We will never move away from communicating with each other in terms that human connection. That first and foremost, that human connection is why property management exists.
Exactly.
It's what we're here to do, is to communicate and provide options for people to live their lives. If we really take it down to that, look at it from a very far place away, like that's essentially what it is. And to be able to provide and to communicate these things digitally is great, as Manuel said, for the communication process part of it. But when we look at it in terms of that human element, that's never going away. We will always want to communicate with somebody. You always want to see something in person. When was the last time that yes, I shouldn't say this. So I was going to say, when was the last time that you ordered bread off online at the grocery store? Well, many of us probably do it now, but I'm sure you want to get into the store and check out your fruits and your vegetables and your groceries, right? So there's always that need for connection. And I think ultimately that's what it is.
Brandon, Manuel, thank you so much. It was super interesting and insightful. Amazing. I have one last question for you when going back to the slides. I think, we had a very vivid discussion already about the current trends of digitalization and property management, and how to adopt and how to successfully implement technologies that are relevant for both the property manager, for the staff, and for the tenant in the property management environment. So we have seen how it, or at least to a certain degree, on how we started, where we are now. I would be very interested in understanding, what do you think will continue to be relevant in the future? Maybe also in a post-COVID world. So how is technology shifting the role of property managers? And how could a holistic view of technology and the corresponding adoption look like? Brent and Manuel, what do you think?
I mean, for me specifically, I think, the importance of keeping certain aspects that we've implemented now. I said before, it's provided our company an opportunity to embrace technology in terms of a tour aspect. We will always have those people who are, international prospects who are looking for a place to stay or long-term rentals. They may not be available for a tour, but it's being able to fill that niche and to keep those communication areas open.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree, Brandon, and I think finding that little niche for everything that we do, right? Like you said with the inspections. So, okay, we're going to do our inspections, but now we're asking the tenants to assist in that process. So I think it has made all of our jobs change, right? The tenant was the tenant, the property manager was the property manager before, but now those places have melded. There's a lot more gray area than there was before, and I think that gives us the chance to work together and understand each other better, if that makes any sense, the tenants and ourselves.
Totally.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah. Brandon, sorry.
No, I was saying, like, I think COVID has provided us, in the industry areas of growth that we would have never had prior to COVID. And I think it's been able to allow a lot of us to understand that there's a need for some of this, and there's a need to continue a lot of what we've just, spent so much time and money and effort into making sure that is available for prospects, tenants, and other people who are interested in leasing.
Exactly. I totally agree.
Thank you. Very well. I think our session is already coming to an end. We were covering a lot of topics today, speaking about managing staff working from home, about how to collect payments, about marketing, about the marketing rental side of things, including virtual tours and the impact of digitalization and the current trends, about how to communicate with your renters, and that communication and the human component is super critical, which even goes so far that maintenance requests need to be dealt with in a specific way, also with the new stakeholder of the government. Thank you very much, and thanks for your also for your perspective and what you expect will come up next in the future. It was fun with you today. If our listeners and viewers have questions, please feel free to make use of the chat. Manuel and Brandon and myself will make ourselves available and answer in the best way possible. And thank you so much, and speak to you soon.